Just thought I'd provide a bit of an overview of our vegetable garden on this date, July 4th, 2021. As you can see in the background, it's done pretty well so far this spring and summer. Surprising because we didn't really have much rain, especially in mid and late spring. We've only recently gotten a few half-decent rains and probably no more than 2 inches for the whole last 2 months. So we've had to do some watering, but as you can see, it's flourishing quite well, and I thought I would just do a little tour of the garden today. When we first came here, much of this area was pure sand. They had taken off a lot of the topsoil for a pit they were excavating nearby. They were going to extend it out here, but for whatever reason they didn't, but they did take off, unfortunately, most of the topsoil off this section. So in order to make it usable for a garden, we had to do a lot of amending of the soil. So over the years, we've brought in lots of loads of leaves of various types. I remember bringing trailer loads of maple and oak leaves from places in Kingston. And so I just bring some of those bags. I probably added 100 bags or more onto this garden. And then over the years, of course, we've had ready access to our horse manure that we get from our horses. So that's a combination of the horse manure itself, wood shavings that we use to supply the bedding for the horse stalls on a daily basis in the winter, leftover hay and straw and that kind of stuff, as well as any dirt that happens to get scraped in with it. So as you can see though, if you keep adding it, and to sandy soil, it's what they call a thirsty soil or a hungry soil, so you have to keep adding amendments to it all the time to keep the tilth really good on it. As you can see, it's nice and rich now. It's got some moisture in it. It can get quite dusty when it really dries up, so that's another reason to keep the organic matter. We have tried mulching at various times using various materials, and the only problem with that is every year we have to add amendments to the soil, so it's hard to add mulches and then have to get under the mulch to add amendments to it. Now, depending on the mulch, you might be able to just till the mulch in, but anyhow, we've been playing around with different methods. Obviously, when you don't have a mulch, the advantage is that the ground warms up faster in the spring, so the planting can maybe start earlier, or the plants will start growing quicker. You can have ready access to the soil. Now, it does make weeding more of an issue because when you don't have the ground covered with a mulch, the weeds come up. But luckily here with sandy soil, the weeding is pretty easy. Anyhow, I'll just give a little tour of the garden here, the various sections, to show you what we've got in it this year. This is just looking into the south end of the garden. This is where our potatoes are planted this year. They take up a space of about 10 by 10 meters or so. And last year we didn't have potatoes here because we were running into quite an issue with a potato beetle outbreak. And so what they say to do in that case is to simply not plant potatoes there for a year or two and then put them somewhere else. Or last year we actually grew some potatoes at a relative's house, so they had some extra space to add a few more for us. And then this year we've replanted here and they seem to be doing good. There are some potato bugs, but as you can see, the plants themselves are, you can see here, they're a good 3.5 feet tall, so they're good and healthy. We've also had to do, like you typically do with potatoes, we've hilled them. So between the rows, there's like a bit of a trench, and then the hills come up around the base of the potatoes, which allows the new potatoes to grow upward from the bases of the old potatoes that you planted. You can see in this view up the side of our garden that we have electric fencing installed from wooden posts on the corners and halfway marks of the garden to T-bars in between. And this is mainly to keep out or to discourage things like raccoons, rabbits, deer, and the other major herbivores that get into the garden on a regular basis. So on the north side of the potatoes, you can see we've got a couple short rows of corn. And then if you look at the other side of the garden in the distance, you can see another, got about 5 or 6 rows of corn going up the west side of the garden. On the inside of the corn, we have a couple rows of carrots. You can see here the bright green, some beets right in here. Then we have some leeks, a row of leeks here. And they go beyond me where I'm standing by another 10 feet. Then we've got 3 or 4 rows of tomatoes here. And these are a mix of various types of tomatoes that one of Diane's brothers has grown in his greenhouse early in the spring, and we get a mix of tomatoes from him. Some tomatoes in cages here, various types, and then this closer row has got string suspending each side of the tomatoes from 2 T-bars on each end. You can see there. And that just provides lateral support on both sides for the tomatoes. Here's our row of beans that are now just starting to produce beans. Here's the other row of those leeks that I mentioned, this extension of the row I'm standing in. We got a few radishes in here. And then we got some zucchini, about 4 or 5 zucchini at my feet here. We don't plant too many of those because they get so big and produce so many zucchini that sometimes you don't know what to do with them all. It shows our cucumber patch, 7 or 8 cucumbers, and we usually get quite a pile of those. Got some parsley down here and some basil right in there. A few cabbages, peppers beyond the basil. More peppers down here at my feet. Sunflowers that basically came in on their own, probably from the birdseed I've been feeding. But we let them grow in here for added interest usually. Kale. We use that for salads and smoothies and things like that. You can see the dill here. We have a few dill plants scattered around, which are great in salads or cooking. And you can see back here, north end, we've got mainly our pea patch here with a variety of peas, snow peas and potted peas. And then we have a bunch of onions on this side, Spanish onions, I believe. Some mixed in lettuce. The lettuce tends to get eaten, I think, by chipmunks that are getting in here still. And then outside of the actual proper garden, there was just a little lobe of garden that we plant in with garlic at this point. And they do well here in the sandy soil, so we always have a good ready supply of garlic, which is nice because we like it on almost everything. So here's a view of the garden from the north end, and this garden's now at about 40 meters by 12 meters in width. And this is our main garden. We also have a smaller garden off to the east of the house, but this is our main one, and we get generally a good winter supply of potatoes. And then as far as the tomatoes and corn, a lot of that is bottled for the winter, so that's where a lot of the tomatoes go. The peas and beans usually get used up more readily. Now sometimes we'll save beans over the winter too. And then a lot of the rest of it we can save or dry the herbs and things like that. Onions can save, garlic saves, so there's a lot of this stuff that remains over the winter. But it is a good amount of work, you know, keeping it in good shape and watering it when you need to and weeding, because the weeds can really take over. One of the negative aspects of using horse manure is that you do get a lot of weed seeds in the manure, especially if it hasn't had the time to thoroughly heat properly to kill the weed seeds, and sometimes you can't really, early in the spring you can't give it a lot of time to compost and rot properly, so you're amending soils with things that have a lot of weed seeds in them. So the key is just to keep on top of it. Don't let them get ahead of you. So I hope you've enjoyed this little review of our garden on July 4th. I'd be happy to hear any of your approaches to your gardening issues, and hopefully some of what I said today has been helpful for you folks.